Protection systems are a weirdly complicated yet integral part of war robots. You know what I mean by protection systems. Damage resistance, resistance mitigation, anti-resistance mitigation, and of course super duper anti-resistance mitigation. My goal with this video is to lay out every form of protection and how you can counter it. I'll be sorting the damage resistance and the mitigation into tiers. If the mitigation's tier is greater than or equal to the resistance's tier, then the resistance is bypassed. Let's get into it. First, Tier 0, regular damage. Every weapon in the game, except for of course frost tasers, can deal damage. Some weapons have special effects that make their damage mitigate different types of resistance, but by default, most weapons will have a portion of their damage cancelled by even the most basic of resistances. Basic resistances can be mitigated by Tier 1 resistance mitigation. These are the oldest and weakest forms of resistance mitigation. The railguns all have 100% mitigation. Titan weapons also all have some mitigation, with alphas maxing out at 100% at max level and betas getting 75%, which can be increased by 12.5% by using the Jaeger Titan pilot skill. Nuclear Reactor also gives 25% mitigation when it's maxed out, and Legendary Pilots can also give you some mitigation to your built-in weapons and your regular weapons. The most basic defenses, which are mitigated by this, are defense points. This is the most basic sort of resistance. It's the oldest, and it can be ignored by basically all sorts of mitigation resistance. You can get defense points from a gigantic amount of sources that I couldn't sit here and list them. Some robots have it built in, some drones and pilots can give it to you, some modules can also give it, with the most well-known one being Last Stand. Onto Tier 2, we have advanced resistance mitigation. Very few weapons have this sort of mitigation, and it's kinda new. The only two are Reaper and the DOT effect. Tier 2 mitigation works against a lot more types of resistance. Of course, it can also ignore defense points, but it can also ignore enhanced defense points, which are a more recent development in defense points. Titan RA, for example, gives you enhanced defense points. The new Fenrir pilot also can do it, as well as the Lifesaver turret and Theseus for Skyros. Force Field is also a form of Tier 2 resistance. It's featured only on several robots, Seraph, Nether, and Lynx, and one Titan, Aether. This resistance has the unique property of starting off really strong and then decaying as it takes damage until it breaks off completely. Currently, no methods exist to give a robot a force field without it just being built in, but force fields are usually just a passive protection that's attached to a robot and not locked behind any sort of ability cooldown. Unless, of course, your name is Seraph or Aether. They have to use their abilities to get their force field, which is kind of unfortunate. Reflectors are also a form of Tier 2 resistance, and they're very similar to force fields, but they don't break off. They also redirect a portion of the damage back to the enemy. Unlike force fields though, they're always locked behind an ability cooldown and are never featured as a passive ability. There's several robots that have reflectors, those being Hawk, Harpy, and Siren. Minos and Luchador are the two titans that also have reflectors. Similarly to force fields, there's no methods to give a robot a reflector without it being built in. Tier 3 resistance mitigation is a bit more simple. There's only one thing that actually is Tier 3 resistance mitigation, and it's the blast charge effect. Now, the blast charge effect can't really be mitigated by any source except for Revenant and Ironhearth, but they don't actually mitigate the effect, they just give the robot immunity to the effect. But the actual damage from blast charge can't be ignored by any source. And what would be Tier 3 resistance? Well, it's not that hard to guess, it's Ochakochi's resistance. Ochakochi has its own special, ridiculously broken type of resistance that makes it so that any sort of damage it takes is converted into DOT. And then of course, Ochakochi has a passive which gives it resistance to DOT, effectively reducing any damage. Blast Charge can, of course, ignore this, but nothing else can. Anyway, I believe that's all. I just wanted to make a short little video about this sort of convoluted system. If I missed anything, be sure to tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching.